Today I'll be updating my college football rankings. So I've still got Ohio State at number one. They had a good win last Saturday over Iowa, 35-7. So Iowa does have a very good defense. So to score 35 points on them was very good. And I know last year Ohio State would have been expected to shut out Iowa because of how horrible Iowa's offense was last year, but it's not the same offense that Iowa had last year. To hold them to only 7 was still good. Iowa's defense did give Ohio State trouble in the first half. The score was only 7-0 Ohio State at halftime, but then they wore out Iowa's defense and scored a touchdown on each of their first 4 possessions in the second half. So Ohio State hasn't played an elite team yet. That will happen this Saturday when they play Oregon. But so far, nothing I've seen from Ohio State makes me uh, doubt them being the best team in the country like I thought they were before the season began. And I've got Texas at number two still because they didn't play this week. They'll play probably their toughest game of the season this Saturday and their rivalry game with Oklahoma. It'll be a big test for their offense because the Oklahoma has a good defense. And then Oregon, I've got at number three. So they did okay overall against Michigan State, winning 31-10. Their defense was dominant, but their offense, I still think, could be better because they had 2 interceptions thrown by Dylan Gabriel when they were in the red zone, and that's not something that you would expect from such an experienced quarterback like him. And Alabama, I only moved down one spot from where I had them last week to number four because even though the Vanderbilt loss was a really bad loss, they do still have the win over Georgia. And I still think that Alabama is a really good team. I think that if they played Vanderbilt 10 times, they'd beat them 9 times. And I think if they played Vanderbilt again this Saturday, they would blow them out. But the team doesn't seem to be the same as it was when Nick Saban was their head coach. He made sure that his players took all of their opponents seriously, even if it was a team like Vanderbilt, even if they have gotten a win against a really good team. I think Alabama came into that game overconfident, and that's why they lost the game. And then Georgia, I've got at number five. They did okay against Auburn, winning 31-13. Auburn does have a decent defense, so 31 points against them was decent. Now Auburn's offense is not very good, but their defense did fine too, holding them to 13 points. I think that Georgia is a similar team to Alabama this year. I just have them behind Alabama because Alabama does have the win over Georgia. And then I moved Ole Miss up to number six. It does look to me like what happened against Kentucky probably was a fluke because they got back to being dominant last Saturday, beating South Carolina 27-3, who had blew out Kentucky. So number seven, I've got Penn State. So they played UCLA and won at 27-11. Not a great performance offensively, and defensively. UCLA, their offense is terrible. So really holding them to 11 points isn't really probably really hard. But I do think that Penn State does have a good defense, but I'm just not a believer in their offense. And then Miami, I've got at number 8. So Miami again last Saturday was not very impressive. They had to come from 25 points behind to beat a terrible California team by 1 point, 39 to 38. Now, Miami has got talent all over their roster, and I would still, right now, pick them to win the ACC. I think they're clearly a better team than they were last year, but I don't think they're a great team. Especially not defensively. Giving up 38 to Cal was terrible. And then BYU, I've got it at number 9. They didn't play this past Saturday, so they didn't really change much in my rankings, but they do deserve to be ranked high right now because of what they've done on the field this season. But I do still think that they're going to lose at least a couple of games. And then Iowa State, I've got it at number 10. The same thing with them as with BYU. They didn't play, but they have done well this season, so that's why I've got them ranked this high. But I also think they're going to lose a couple of games at least this season. And then Notre Dame, I've got at 11. They didn't play last Saturday, and I've got them ahead of Texas A&M, but I've got it 12 because they do have the win over Texas A&M. Even though now I think Texas A&M might be a better team actually than Notre Dame is. They looked really impressive against Missouri last Saturday, and at Texas A&M, I didn't think until last Saturday that they were an actual SEC contender. But as weird as this college football season has been so far, and as well as they played in that game, I think you at least have to consider Texas A&M as a possibility to win the SEC, and for sure consider them as a possibility to make the college football playoff. Then LSU, I've got it number 13. They didn't play this last Saturday, but they've got a big game coming up against Ole Miss next Saturday, so that will give them a chance to move way up in the rankings if they can win that game. And then 14, I've got Tennessee. So I moved them down, obviously, because they lost to Arkansas, who is not a very good team, in my opinion. Now, I do think Arkansas is clearly much better than they were last year, and I thought they would be. So I do still think that Tennessee is a good team, but that's all I think they are. Nico, I'm about to leave you. Maybe in a year or two he can be an elite quarterback, but right now he's just about average. So Arkansas has played really good teams close a lot in the past. They did it several times last season, so I wasn't surprised that it was a close game in the fourth quarter. But Arkansas has hardly ever won those types of games, so I was surprised that Arkansas actually won the game. And then I've got Kansas State at 15. They didn't play last Saturday, so my thoughts on them haven't changed. Still think they're one of the Big 12's best teams, or maybe even the best team. And then 16, I've got Utah. They didn't play last Saturday, so my thoughts on them really haven't changed. Can't really know where to rank Utah because of Cam Rising being out when they lost that game to Arizona. And then 17, I've got Oklahoma. They didn't play this past Saturday. They'll have an opportunity to move way up in the rankings, of course, this week if they could get the win over Texas. But that's obviously going to be really hard for them to do with the way their offense has been struggling this season. And then Clemson, I've got at number 18. They didn't do as well as I thought they would against Florida State, who's a horrible team, but they did win the game fairly easily at 29 to 13. And then Indiana, I've got at number 19. So Indiana hasn't played a team any good yet this season, but at 6-0, they do deserve to be ranked. And when I made my prediction video for them before the season began. I said that I thought that they would be a surprise team, and I was right about them. But it looks like they may actually be even better than I thought they were going to be. Now, of course, they won't beat Ohio State, but they could possibly win 10 games this season. The way their schedule is. And then at Pittsburgh, I've got at number 20. Like Indiana, they haven't played any great teams yet, but being undefeated, they do deserve to be ranked. And they're a surprise team too, but I did not expect Pittsburgh to be any good. I thought that they would be horrible this season, so they've proved me wrong so far. And then 21, I've got Texas Tech. So I've got them ranked because they are 5-1. So Texas Tech, I do not think is a great team, but at times they have looked pretty good. Like last Saturday when they went on the road and got the win over Arizona, 28-22. But then at times they've looked really bad. Like they had a blowout loss to Washington State, and then they had to go into overtime to beat an FCS team. So I've got SMU at 22. So at 5-1, they do look pretty good so far. It looks like I probably was right about them having a good season this year. And their only loss wasn't really close. It lost to BYU, who turns out to be a pretty good team this season. SMU got a pretty good win over Louisville this past Saturday at 34-27. And then Illinois, I've got at 23. So they didn't play last Saturday, but I've got them ahead of Nebraska, who I've got at 24 because they do have the win over Nebraska. Nebraska got the win over Rutgers in a defensive battle last Saturday, 14-7, like I thought they would. And 25, I've got Boise State, which is what I had them last Saturday. So Boise State, I think, could possibly be even better than 25 this season because of that running back that they've got. But that loss to Oregon, even though it was only 3 points, Oregon has been playing better since then. So I'm not really sure that they are actually that close to being as good as a team like Oregon. But that will be it with this video, and please subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I'll be back